girl walked slowly down the narrow streets, her thin jacket wrapped tightly around her. The cold air cut through her like tiny needles, but she did not mind. She had felt cold and hungry many times before. It was normal. She carried her small bag close to her chest, and inside, there was very little, just a few clothes and a worn notebook filled with sheet music she had copied from the library long ago. Music had become her world, the one place she could escape everything else. Most people hurried past her, wrapped in their coats, lost in their own thoughts. She watched them quietly, never asking for anything, because she had learned that asking usually led to disappointment. She had been on the streets for a long time, moving from shelter to shelter, sleeping under bridges, and in abandoned buildings. People called her unlucky, but she knew that luck had nothing to do with it. Life had been difficult, but music made it bearable. She found a quiet corner in a small park, where a public piano had been left for anyone to play. It was old, the keys were chipped, and some notes sounded out of tune. She didn't care. She ran her fingers over the keys, and a melody began to form, soft and trembling at first, like the first light of dawn. She closed her eyes and let the music flow through her. It was her secret world, a place where no one could hurt her, a place where she could feel alive. She remembered the first time she discovered music. A few years ago, she had wandered into a community center by accident. A kind older man had noticed her watching from the doorway and invited her to sit at the piano. At first, she had been too scared to touch the keys, but then something inside her awakened. Her fingers moved naturally, as if they remembered songs she had never been taught. The music came from somewhere deep inside her, and for the first time in her life, she felt understood. Since then, she had practiced whenever she could, stealing moments wherever pianos were available. Sometimes it was at a school she snuck into, sometimes at churches when the doors were open. She had never had a teacher, never a proper lesson, but she learned by listening, by watching, and by feeling. Music was her language and she spoke it fluently. One chilly afternoon, she heard voices behind her. A group of women and men, dressed neatly, were standing by the park bench. She did not pay much attention at first, used to people looking and walking away. But then one of them spoke. "Did you hear that? That girl playing the piano. She has something special." The girl's hands froze on the keys. She peeked through her hair and saw them watching her closely. The tallest woman stepped forward. "We are teachers from a music school nearby. We have been searching for talented students. You have an incredible gift. Will you come and perform for us?" The girl shook her head quickly. "I can't," she whispered. "I don't have the clothes. I don't have a place to go. I don't belong anywhere." The woman smiled gently. "It doesn't matter where you come from. We only want to hear your music. Please just try." The girl hesitated. She had been asked many times to perform, and most of the time she had run away, too scared to show herself to strangers. But there was something different about this group. They didn't seem threatening, and they seemed genuinely interested in her music. She nodded slowly, barely able to believe what she was doing. They offered to walk her to a nearby building, a small music hall, and she allowed them to guide her, keeping her eyes on the ground. Inside the hall, the air was warmer, the walls lined with paintings of famous musicians and long-forgotten concerts. The piano was polished and beautiful, with ivory keys that gleamed under the soft lights. The girl's fingers itched to touch it, but fear still lingered. The teachers asked her to play a piece they considered difficult, a test of skill they thought no ordinary student could manage. She had never been taught the piece, had never seen the notes. Her heart raced, and her hands trembled. "I can't," she said quietly, but the teachers encouraged her gently. "Just try. Don't worry about mistakes. Let the music guide you." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had done this before, in hidden corners in quiet parks, where no one could see her. Now so many eyes were watching, expecting, waiting. Slowly, she placed her fingers on the keys. At first, the notes were hesitant, unsure, but then something remarkable happened. Her fingers remembered the music, moving in patterns that seemed impossible without training. Her mind and hands worked together, and soon, the difficult piece began to emerge from her fingertips. The room filled with sound, rich and vibrant, trembling with emotion and depth. The teacher's eyes widened. They whispered to each other, realizing this was beyond normal talent. She didn't notice them, didn't notice the awe in the room. She was lost in the music as she always was. Memories of cold nights and empty stomachs, of harsh words and lonely streets, poured into every note. The piano became her voice, speaking the story of her life without words. The piece was difficult, they had warned her, but to her, it felt like it was always inside her, waiting to be played. When the last note faded, the room was silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. The girl opened her eyes, startled. She had never seen such reaction. She had expected judgment, criticism, or dismissal, but not this. The teachers approached her with smiles and awe. "We have never seen anyone play like this," one said. "You have a gift that cannot be taught. You must come study with us. We can help you." The girl's eyes filled with tears, not just from the music, but from the recognition, the care, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. That day marked the beginning of something new. For the first time, she felt that she could belong somewhere, that her music was not just a secret comfort, but a bridge to a life she had never imagined. The cold streets, the loneliness, the hunger, they were still there, but now there was a light, a chance, and the music that had carried her through everything would carry her further than she had ever dreamed. After the performance, the girl left the hall feeling exhausted and confused. She walked slowly through the city streets, her mind spinning with thoughts she could barely understand. People passed her, wrapped in their warm coats, chatting or hurrying to their destinations. She felt invisible, yet somehow something had changed. The music had opened a door she had never known existed, but the fear and uncertainty of stepping through it made her chest tight. The teachers had given her their cards, insisting she contact them, but she had tucked them into her bag, unsure if she was ready. Life on the streets had taught her to be cautious, to trust very few people. But their words echoed in her mind. They had said she had a gift beyond anything they had seen, and part of her wanted to believe them, even though she had learned not to believe in miracles. The next day, she returned to the park, to the piano that had always been her refuge. The old keys were worn and chipped, yet they felt familiar under her fingers. She played quietly, letting the music speak what she could not. Her mind wandered back to the hall, to the faces of the teachers, the wonder in their eyes. She wondered if she could do it again, if she could survive being seen and judged, not as a homeless girl, but as someone talented, someone special. It was not easy. Each night, she slept in cold shelters or on damp floors, and each day, she scavenged for food, but she kept music in her heart. She practiced whenever she could, copying pieces from old music books, learning by ear when she could not read the notes. Every melody she played seemed to lift a little of the weight from her shoulders, but the weight was still there, reminding her of her struggles. When the teachers returned to the park, the girl was hesitant. She had not yet reached out to them, fearing rejection, fearing that she would disappoint. But one of them recognized her immediately. "We know it is hard," the teacher said gently. "We only want to help. You do not have to do this alone." The girl nodded silently, her eyes downcast. She was not sure she believed them yet, but something inside her stirred. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the faint belief that her life could be more than survival. The teachers invited her to the music school again, offering lessons and a safe place to practice. They asked her to perform another piece, one even more difficult than the first. Her heart raced at the thought. She had never had a formal lesson, had never learned the rules, and now they were asking her to meet a standard that seemed impossible. Yet the music was inside her, and she knew she had to try. At home that evening, she found a quiet corner in the shelter and laid out her few belongings. She opened her worn notebook and began to play softly on an imaginary piano, running her fingers over the notes she had memorized. The melody grew stronger as she practiced, her confidence slowly building. She remembered the teacher's encouragement and repeated their words in her mind. "Let the music guide you. Do not fear mistakes." When she returned to the school, the hall was filled with students, teachers, and a few visitors. She felt a lump in her throat, but she reminded herself of the park piano, of the quiet strength she had discovered there. She sat at the piano, her hands trembling, and began to play. At first, the notes were hesitant, but soon, the music flowed like a river, strong and clear. She poured everything into the melody. The cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness, and the moments of quiet joy she had found in music. The audience was mesmerized. They watched, their faces reflecting awe and disbelief. The teachers whispered among themselves, realizing that this girl, who had nothing in material wealth, had a mind and heart capable of understanding and expressing music at a level far beyond her years. Each note seemed to carry a story, a piece of her soul. It was more than skill. It was emotion, depth, and beauty that could not be learned. When the piece ended, the silence was thick for a moment. Then, slowly, applause filled the room. The girl felt tears streaming down her face. She had played not for recognition, not for reward, but because she had to. Music had been her companion, her teacher, and now it had become a bridge to something greater. The teachers approached her again, this time with a mixture of excitement and respect. "You have a gift that is rare and precious," one said. "We want to help you develop it. Will you trust us?" The girl hesitated. Trust did not come easily. Her life had been full of disappointments, of people who promised help and then disappeared. But the sincerity in their eyes, the way they had watched her play, made her consider it. Maybe it was time to believe, just a little. She nodded slowly, unsure of the future, but willing to try. It was the first step toward a life she had only imagined in dreams. Over the next weeks, the girl visited the music school regularly. She received guidance on techniques she had never known, learned new ways to understand rhythm and melody, and discovered the joy of structured practice. Yet, she never lost the raw emotion that made her playing so powerful. The teachers were amazed at how quickly she absorbed the lessons, how naturally she applied them, and how her unique voice remained unchanged. Outside of the lessons, life continued to be challenging. She still struggled with basic needs, still worried about the nights she would spend alone, and still faced the harshness of a world that often ignored her. But music had given her a reason to wake up each day with purpose, a way to survive emotionally and mentally. She found small moments of peace and joy, noticing the little things. The way sunlight fell on the streets, the laughter of children, the kindness of strangers who offered food or smiles. One evening, after a long day of lessons, she returned to her small corner in the shelter. She played quietly on a borrowed keyboard, reflecting on how much had changed in a short time. She remembered the days when music was just a secret, a private comfort, and now it had become a path forward, a way to connect with the world. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they were accompanied by something new: hope. The girl knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and times when she would feel overwhelmed. But she also knew she had a gift, something that no one could take away. Music had carried her through the darkest times, and now it would guide her into a future that was slowly beginning to take shape. With each note, she grew stronger, more confident, and more ready to face whatever came next. She realized that her life, though still difficult, was no longer just about survival. It was about growth, discovery, and the possibility of achieving something extraordinary. The girl arrived at the music school early, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her small bag. Today was different. Today she would perform in front of more people than ever before. Students, teachers, and even a few visitors had gathered in the hall to hear her play. She felt a knot of fear in her stomach, a mixture of excitement and anxiety that made her heart race. She wanted to run away, but she could not. She had come too far to turn back now. She entered the hall quietly, glancing around at the polished wooden floors, the gleaming piano, and the attentive faces watching her. The girl had never performed in a room like this before. The music she had practiced on in parks and shelters was raw and private, meant only for herself. Now the music would be exposed, examined, and judged. She swallowed hard, trying to calm her nerves, but the knot in her stomach tightened. The head teacher approached her gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You can do this," they said softly. "Remember, play from your heart. Let the music guide you, not your fear." The girl nodded, taking a deep breath, and walked to the piano. She seated herself, feeling the smooth keys under her fingers. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The fear, the doubt, the cold nights on the streets, and she was alone with the piano, her old friend. She began to play slowly, testing the keys and letting her fingers find the notes. At first, the music was tentative, cautious, but as she continued, a transformation occurred. The piece she had been practicing for weeks began to emerge, flowing naturally, as if it had always been inside her. Her fingers danced across the keys, creating a melody that was both delicate and powerful, full of emotion and life. The audience watched in silence, captivated by the girl's performance. Each note seemed to tell a story, the struggles of her past, the loneliness of her nights, the small joys she had discovered along the way. Her music was not just skill. It was her soul speaking aloud. The teachers exchanged glances, amazed at the depth and maturity of her playing. They had never seen anyone express emotion through music in such a profound way. As she continued, the girl lost herself in the music. She did not notice the tears forming in the eyes of some listeners, the whispers of admiration, or the astonishment on the faces of the teachers. All that existed was the piano and the melody flowing through her. She felt a sense of freedom, a release of everything she had carried for so long. The room seemed to vanish, leaving only the sound of the notes, the rhythm of her heart, and the quiet power of her expression. The piece reached its climax, each note building on the last, creating a wave of emotion that filled the hall. The girl's hands moved with precision and grace, yet there was a rawness to the music, a sense of honesty that could not be taught. She poured all her energy, all her experiences, into the performance, and when the final note lingered in the air, the room was silent for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. The girl opened her eyes, startled by the reaction. She had not expected such a response. The audience was on its feet, clapping and cheering, and she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time, she understood that her music could touch people, that it could move them in ways words never could. The fear and doubt that had plagued her melted away, replaced by a quiet sense of pride and accomplishment. The teachers approached her once more, their expressions filled with admiration and encouragement. "You have an extraordinary gift," one said. "Your talent is beyond what we imagined. We want to help you develop it further. Will you allow us to guide you?" The girl nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She felt a mixture of relief and disbelief, unable to fully grasp that her life was changing in ways she had never dared to imagine. In the weeks that followed, the girl's life began to shift. She continued her lessons at the music school, learning new techniques and exploring different styles of music. Her natural ability combined with guidance from the teachers allowed her to grow rapidly. She practiced diligently, not out of obligation, but because she loved it and wanted to discover the full extent of her potential. Each day brought new challenges and new joys, and she embraced them with determination and curiosity. Outside the music school, life remained difficult. She still faced uncertainty and the harsh realities of her past. Some nights, she returned to the shelter, where the cold and hunger reminded her of the world she had left behind. But the music had become her anchor, a constant source of comfort and strength. It reminded her that she was capable of more than survival, that she could create beauty even in the midst of hardship. The girl began to gain recognition beyond the school. Visitors who had witnessed her performance shared her story with others, spreading word of the homeless girl with an extraordinary talent. Invitations arrived to perform at small concerts, community events, and charity functions. Each opportunity was both thrilling and terrifying, as she had never performed for large audiences before. Yet, with each performance, her confidence grew, and her music became even more expressive and nuanced. The teachers continued to mentor her, helping her navigate the challenges of public performance, technique, and self-expression. They encouraged her to experiment, to take risks, and to find her own voice. The girl absorbed every lesson, blending her raw emotion with newfound skill. Her playing became a reflection of her journey, capturing the pain, resilience, and hope that had shaped her life. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at a community event, the girl sat quietly backstage, listening to the applause fade. She thought about how far she had come, from a homeless girl playing in parks to a young musician captivating audiences. She reflected on the teachers who had believed in her, the small moments of kindness she had encountered, and the strength she had discovered within herself. The music had been her companion, her teacher, and now it was her way forward. As she packed her bag and prepared to leave, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. The world was still challenging, and she would face many obstacles ahead, but she had found her place within it. Music was no longer just a secret comfort. It was her voice, her identity, and her path to a future filled with possibilities. The girl knew that she would continue to grow, to explore, and to share her gift, carrying the lessons of her past with her and letting the music guide her every step of the way. After her remarkable performance, the girl's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. People who had witnessed her play spread the word of her talent, and soon, she was no longer just the homeless girl who played in parks. She was the girl with extraordinary music flowing from her fingertips, a genius hidden in plain sight. The recognition was both overwhelming and exhilarating. For the first time, strangers approached her not with judgment, but with admiration and curiosity. The teachers continued to guide her, helping her navigate the sudden attention and new opportunities. They encouraged her to attend more formal events, competitions, and concerts, and they introduced her to other musicians who could help her grow. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she belonged in these spaces. She had spent so much of her life feeling invisible and unwanted that stepping into the spotlight felt unnatural and frightening. But with gentle encouragement, she began to take small steps, realizing that she had earned the right to be there. Opportunities started arriving quickly. A local radio station wanted her to perform on a special program, showcasing talented young musicians. A small concert hall invited her to play a solo recital, offering her the chance to share her music with a larger audience. Each invitation brought a mix of excitement and anxiety, but she accepted them, learning to trust in her abilities and the support of the teachers who believed in her. As she stepped onto stages she had never imagined, she began to understand the power of her music. It was not just about playing notes perfectly. It was about conveying emotion, telling stories, and connecting with people. Each performance was a journey, and with every audience, she grew more confident and expressive. The teachers watched in awe as she transformed from a quiet, cautious girl into a poised and powerful musician, capable of holding a room with nothing but her music. Outside of her musical pursuits, her daily life also began to shift. She found a small room to stay in, provided through a program that helped talented young musicians who had no home. For the first time, she had a place of her own, a safe space where she could practice, rest, and feel secure. The warmth of her room, the simple comfort of a bed, and the quiet moments she could spend without fear or worry brought a sense of stability she had never known. Despite these changes, she never forgot her past. The streets, the shelters, and the cold nights were still part of her story, and she carried them with her in every note she played. They gave her music depth and authenticity, allowing her to connect with audiences in a way that was both genuine and moving. People felt the honesty in her performances, and many were touched deeply by the emotions she conveyed. Her story began to inspire others as well. Young musicians who struggled with their own challenges looked to her as an example of perseverance and resilience. The teachers encouraged her to share her experiences, to speak about how music had helped her survive and grow, and she did so with quiet dignity and honesty. She spoke not for praise, but to show others that talent, determination, and a love for what you do can overcome even the most difficult circumstances. One day, a well-known musician visited the school after hearing about her talent. They were curious to meet the girl who had captured so many hearts with her playing. When they heard her perform, they were astonished. The music was flawless yet filled with feeling, a rare combination that few ever achieve. They offered to mentor her, to help her refine her skills and prepare for professional opportunities. The girl felt a mix of disbelief and gratitude. Such an offer had been unimaginable just months ago when she had played in parks, unnoticed and alone. The mentorship opened new doors. She began participating in competitions and festivals, gaining recognition for her extraordinary ability. Every step of the way, she faced challenges. Nerves before performances, the pressure to succeed, and the constant balancing of her past struggles with new responsibilities. Yet, she persevered, relying on the lessons she had learned from the teachers and the strength she had developed through years of hardship. With each success, her confidence grew. She began to dream in ways she never had before. She imagined a life where music could sustain her, where she could inspire others, and where her talent could lead to new experiences and possibilities. The idea of a future filled with hope and accomplishment was no longer a distant fantasy but a real, tangible goal she could pursue. The teachers and mentors continued to support her, not just in music but in life. They helped her navigate challenges, offered advice, and provided encouragement when she doubted herself. Their belief in her gave her a foundation she had never had, and it allowed her to focus on her growth and potential rather than her past limitations. Slowly, she began to see herself not as a homeless girl, but as a musician with a voice, a story, and a future. In the evenings, she would sit by the piano in her room, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the cold nights on the streets, the times she had felt invisible and forgotten, and the moments when music had been her only solace. She realized that those experiences had shaped her, giving her depth, empathy, and resilience. They were no longer just memories of hardship, they were the foundation of her artistry. Through all of this, the girl never lost the sense of wonder and joy that music had always brought her. Each new piece she learned, each performance she gave, was an opportunity to explore, to express herself, and to connect with others. She approached her craft with curiosity, discipline, and passion, and the results were extraordinary. People who heard her play often remarked not just on her technical skill, but on the way she conveyed emotion, the way her music told a story that touched hearts. As her reputation grew, she began to receive letters and messages from people inspired by her story. Young musicians who faced their own challenges reached out, expressing gratitude for the example she had set. The girl realized that her journey was not just about her own growth, but also about inspiring others to believe in themselves, to pursue their passions, and to overcome obstacles. Her music had become a bridge, connecting her past with her future, and linking her to a wider world in ways she had never imagined. Over time, she also began to give back. She volunteered at community centers, teaching young children who had little access to music, sharing the lessons she had learned and encouraging them to find their own voices. She understood the power of mentorship and support, having experienced it herself, and she wanted to offer that to others. Through these experiences, she found a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment, realizing that her talent could change lives, not just hers but also the lives of those she touched. In quiet moments, the girl would sit alone at the piano, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From the streets to the stage, from fear and uncertainty to recognition and opportunity, her life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. She understood that the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength, the skill, and the heart to face them. Music had given her a voice, a future, and a reason to hope, and she embraced it fully, ready to continue her journey and see where it would lead. Years passed, and the girl, now a young woman, had grown into a remarkable pianist, known for her extraordinary talent and the emotional depth of her music. The journey that had begun in the quiet corners of parks and abandoned buildings had taken her far beyond anything she had ever imagined. The difficult nights on the streets, the uncertainty of hunger, and the solitude of her early life had shaped her in ways that made her music uniquely powerful and deeply human. She traveled to different cities, performing in grand concert halls, music festivals, and community events. Her name began to spread, and people came from far and wide to hear her play. But despite the growing recognition and the applause that greeted her, she never forgot the streets, the shelters, or the small, worn piano that had first introduced her to the world of music. Those experiences remained a part of her, woven into every note she played. Every performance was a story. She poured herself into the music, allowing her fingers to express everything she had lived through. The struggles, the fear, the hope, and the small moments of joy. Audiences often remarked on how her music seemed to speak directly to their hearts, conveying emotions that words could never capture. Her talent was undeniable, but it was the sincerity and authenticity in her playing that left people mesmerized. She also began mentoring young musicians, especially those who faced challenges similar to what she had endured. She visited shelters and community centers, teaching children who had little access to musical instruments or lessons. She shared not only technical skills but also the importance of perseverance, self-belief, and the courage to follow one's passion despite obstacles. Her story inspired many, showing that talent, determination, and love for one's craft could overcome even the harshest circumstances. Throughout her career, she continued to push herself, exploring different styles and techniques, and taking on increasingly challenging compositions. She sought out teachers and mentors who could guide her further, but she always retained her unique voice, shaped by her life experiences. The music she created was not just a reflection of skill, but a mirror of her journey, full of depth, resilience, and humanity. Her success brought practical changes to her life as well. She no longer worried about where she would sleep or what she would eat. She had a home, a place where she could rest, practice, and reflect. She had opportunities that would have been unimaginable when she played in parks and shelters, but she never let comfort dull her connection to the music that had saved her. She practiced diligently, not out of obligation, but out of a deep love for the art that had carried her through the darkest times. Even with fame and recognition, she remained humble and grounded. She remembered the teachers who had first believed in her, the small acts of kindness from strangers, and the quiet moments of music that had kept her alive and hopeful. She acknowledged that her journey was shaped by both talent and the support she had received, and she remained committed to helping others find their path. One evening, after a performance in a grand concert hall, she sat quietly backstage, letting the applause fade and reflecting on her life. She thought about how far she had come, from a girl hiding in corners, playing to soothe herself, to a musician who inspired thousands. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for every moment, every challenge, and every person who had helped her along the way. Music had been her refuge, her voice, and now it was her way of connecting with the world. Her story continued to reach people in unexpected ways. Journalists, students, and music lovers sought her out to hear her experiences and advice. She gave interviews and shared her journey, always emphasizing the importance of persistence, passion, and finding one's own voice. She wanted others to know that hardships did not define them, and that even in the most difficult circumstances, talent and determination could open doors. As her career progressed, she also began composing her own music, blending classical techniques with the raw emotion she had cultivated over the years. Her compositions were performed by orchestras, chamber groups, and soloists, and each piece carried a piece of her story, her struggles, her triumphs, and the depth of feeling that had always defined her playing. Critics praised her not only for technical mastery but also for the authenticity and soulfulness that radiated from her compositions. Despite the accolades and achievements, she never lost sight of her beginnings. She returned to the places where she had played in parks, giving small performances and teaching local children. She wanted them to experience the same sense of hope and possibility that music had given her. She understood the power of connection, of showing that even the most overlooked and struggling individuals could possess extraordinary gifts. In her personal life, she also found stability and companionship. She formed close friendships with fellow musicians and mentors who had supported her throughout her journey. Their encouragement and camaraderie reminded her of the importance of community and trust, something she had long lacked. She learned to balance her career with moments of reflection, rest, and joy, embracing life fully and deliberately. Years after that first hesitant performance in the music hall, she returned to the stage with a deep sense of confidence and purpose. The concert hall was packed, and as she sat at the piano, she felt the familiar rush of nerves and excitement. But now, she was not the frightened girl from the streets. She was a musician who had faced life's harshest challenges and transformed them into art that moved people. She began to play, and the music flowed effortlessly, a perfect blend of technique, emotion, and life experience. The audience was captivated, many moved to tears by the beauty and sincerity of her playing. She knew in that moment that everything she had endured, the struggles, the loneliness, the fear, had led her here. Music had been her constant companion, her teacher, and her savior, and now it had become her way of making a lasting impact on the world. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only discovered her gift but had also used it to inspire, uplift, and touch the lives of others. As the final note lingered and the hall erupted into applause, she closed her eyes and let the moment wash over her. She had come a long way from the streets, from the lonely nights and the makeshift pianos, to this place of recognition and accomplishment. And yet, she remained the same at heart. A girl who had found solace in music, who had survived through passion and resilience, and who had learned that even the smallest act of courage could change a life forever. Her journey was far from over, but she had learned to embrace it fully, to face each challenge with strength, and to continue sharing her gift with the world. Music was no longer just a refuge. It was her voice, her identity, and her legacy. She understood that the true power of her story lay not only in her talent but also in her ability to inspire others, to show that hope and determination could transform lives. And as she played, she knew that every note carried the echoes of her past, the triumph of her present, and the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities.